We are your hosts, the co-chairs of the Buffalo and Rochester, New York State TESOL region, and we'll introduce ourselves. We are, the co-chairs of the region, so I'll just say people's names and, you can get to know who we are. Jamie Scripps is from Rush Henrietta Central School District.
Hello.
Jenna Colerick is not here, but she was, so hopefully her internet will be up and running. But Jenna should be joining us. We have Joanna Fogarasi from Buffalo Public Schools, Kate Kleiber from Genesee Community College.
Hello, everyone.
Nicole Miller from Buffalo Public Schools.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Shauna Sweet. I'm from Midwest Arborn in Rochester. And Tanya Rosado Berenger is also our Director of Regions. She's from Mid-State Arborn, so she may occasionally pop in and join us as well. So we're your hosts. We're glad to have you, but our fantastic moderator is going to be Joanna. So take it away, Joanna.
All right. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I'm keep having to mute myself because my dogs are super excited and they keep making a lot of noise. So welcome to our event. As you join our event, we're just going to ask that you try to avoid distractions. I know that a lot of us are home right now and it's really hard to unplug, maybe not necessarily from our phones or our electronics since we're using them, but maybe from our family or our dogs in my case. So, just try your best to unplug, to be present, to avoid sidebar conversations. And, our chat is open for any questions you might have. We're hoping to have quite a bit of time to address some of the questions that you might have for our panelists today. So, feel free to participate and help lead in guiding the information that you want to get out of our session.
So just thinking about some rules for netiquette as we're engaging in this virtual world. Hopefully, everyone's able to remain on mute because we really want our panelists to have, most of the floor. But we really do encourage you to ask questions within the chat and just feel free to comment everything within the chat. And then, we just always want to keep an open mind and respecting diversity and knowing that we all come from different places and from different experiences, and just to keep that in mind. And I did want to acknowledge really quick, I know Jenna has entered the building, Jenna Colerick from Buffalo Public Schools. And,
hi, everyone.
And Tanya Rosado Berenger from Mid-State Arborn is the Director of Regions for NICE TESOL. So she's also here. I'm glad to have you guys.
Thank you. We're excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Also, just a quick note, if you're not a member of New York State TESOL, join today. We have a membership rate of $15 as an April promo special for people in higher education. So you can feel free to add that code SPRING15, and you get to attend members only events, get first information from our message board and our job board, and also be able to get CTLE credits, which is professional development credits for any New York State TESOL session. So I just want to give that plug.
All right, so with that, we're going to get started. We're going to introduce our panelists. We'll go in alphabetical order by first name. So we'll hear from Adriana first, then Christian, then Julio, and then Paola. And they're just going to tell us a little bit about themselves so we can get to know a little bit about their background before we get started. So go ahead.
Thank you, Joanna. So my name is Adriana Ures Rodriguez. I am from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I am now living in Massachusetts. I moved about 3 years ago to go to law school. So I did all of my elementary, middle school, high school, and undergrad in Puerto Rico. And I am about to graduate into the law profession. And I don't know any interesting facts right now. I feel like I'm blanking on that one, so I'm going to pass it to the next person.
Hi everyone, my name is Cristian Rafael Cruz Santana. I am from Puerto Rico, out of the town of Cataño. Let me see. Pretty much, I came here when I was 13, so most of my high-level education happened here in the States. Bachelor's, master's, all around this area. My current job is an ENL teacher here at Roth in Russian Rieta District. I live in Rochester area in New York State. Something interesting about me, I feel like I can fix anything, and we're talking about anything. Cars, you know, small engines, anything.
I need my brakes done. Are you available?
That's easy, yeah. I don't do
Excellent.
transmissions though. Takes too much.
Excellent.
Too much time.
Good to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, hello, good afternoon or good evening. My name is Julio Jordan. I am from the second biggest Puerto Rican population, which is New York City. So I didn't grow up in Puerto Rico. I actually grew up in the South Bronx, was born in Brooklyn. My educational background for most of my early education was in the South Bronx, so New York City school district, and then the remainder of high school and college here in Rochester, New York. I am currently the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with Ibero-American Action League. And my current state is Rochester, New York. Interesting fact is I cannot fix anything to do with cars, so I'm glad to know that Christian can. So you're in Russian Rieta, you're not too far. I'll make sure I reach out. But I'm also an author, motivational speaker, and just a lover of life. That's all I have.
Hi, my name is Paola Alamonduher. I'm from Cabo, Puerto Rico. My educational background, basically, I've been all my life in Puerto Rico, so elementary, middle school, high school, undergrad. I'm about to have my bachelor's degree in animal sciences, and I'm moving to Massachusetts on the next month. What else? My current role, I guess, student. An interesting fact, I don't know, I could say I have a lot of dogs, but everyone has dogs, so I know nothing about cars, so yay, someone else that doesn't know anything about cars.
Oh, a lot. What's a lot of dogs?
Like 3, because like I have my own, but then I have to take care of my families, because I have family that moved to Ohio and then left their animals here, so we go take care of them as well. And just I usually work at vet clinics, so it's just like work like taking care of all of these dogs. It just feels like they're all my dogs.
Cool. Thank you very much, you know, for the getting a little personal with us so we can really know who we're dealing with here. So at this point, I believe we're going to be hearing a little bit about Ibero, and then we will get to our panelists. Julio, go ahead.
Yep, I am getting there. Can everyone see the screen? All right, so as I said, I do work with Ibero-American Action League. Ibero-American Action League, just to give you a little brief background, was started about 52 years ago to address the need for specifically Puerto Ricans and Latinos in the Rochester area, because at that time it seemed like there were a lot of organizations serving the needs of other individuals, but Latinos were not really being engaged and didn't know where to go, where to turn to when they needed help. So therefore, Ibero was brought about with PRYD. Coincidentally, the Puerto Rican Festival started at the same time, and a lot of other initiatives started at about the same time. So just want to give you that little brief background. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm also a cultural competency trainer. And what I'm going to talk today about is engaging the Latino families and giving you a perspective of our region, specifically being the Western New York region, Rochester, Buffalo. I know that we go into Buffalo, so definitely want to address that. Growth of the community. The Latino community in Monroe County has grown from less than 17,000 when it originally started to now we're over 76,000 people just in the Monroe County. So when you look at that, Monroe County, I believe, is about 250,000 people. So we make up well over 25% of the community here in the Monroe County area. The Latino population in Monroe County grew 56% between 2000 and 2012 to 2016, while the county's total population growth rate was less than 2%. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is a little bit later on. Some of the communication values that I want to speak to, specifically dealing with and engaging Latinos, families, students, professionals, is one of the things that we really center and focus around is trust. That's an essential element of building relationships with Latinos and Hispanics. We tend to not want to associate or deal with you if we can't trust you. We don't necessarily look at titles. We don't look at, you know, if you have initials in front of your name, if you are affluent, wealthy, drive a beautiful car, live in a big fancy. We really value trust more than anything else. Latino Hispanic culture is formal. You'll notice and you'll see in Latino families that we are very close knit, and there are times where in the same household you would have grandma, parents, and children all residing in the same household. We normally do not believe in nursing homes and those types of things because we believe, and I know for me personally, I took care of my father until he passed away, that we kind of exchange roles. They take care of us when we're young, we take care of them when they're old. So that's something that's important to the Latino culture. And then lastly, respect. Respect is essential. Respect is crucial to our communication values and engaging us and truly being able to interact with us is we value respect because above all, that's the one thing that is probably the least costly. So we really focus around that. Religion and spirituality is highly valued. If you look at the picture that I have up, that is St. Michael's Church in the city of Rochester on Clinton Avenue. The actual place where the picture was taken is now the International Plaza, which is, for those from Puerto Rico, it's the typical placita that is located across from the major church. We have one now. It will be grand opening actually tomorrow. So if you're in the area and would like to check it out, they'll be grand opening from 5 to 8 p.m. And there's a lot of little food stands, bakeries, children's books. There'll be some live entertainment, obviously following the COVID protocols, but that is located right across from St. Michael's Church. And that church is the church that most Latinos in the Rochester area attend. That is a staple of the community. And the priest who was there, he is now passed on, Father Tracy, is basically our father in the community. So God bless his soul. Some of the family values that I have up here, unity is very important among the Latino Hispanic cultures. Like I said before, family consists not only of the father, the wife, and the children, but also brothers, sisters, grandparents, uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces. So basically, if you talk to one of us, guess what? You got to talk to all of us. We're usually all involved in every step. That's the reason why usually when you go to a graduation and it's a Latino's graduation, when their name is called up, usually you get a roar from the crowd, and it's typically just the family of that individual that goes wherever we go. Respect for elders and parents is required and expected in Latino Hispanic families. Bendición is our way of asking for our blessings from our elders. And we do that. I even do that with elders that are not my family, but that I treat like family and have a lot of respect for. So that's something that definitely is very common. And the family shares financial and emotional support with one another. So we're really there for each other through thick and thin. You know, and it's something to behold when we have great times, something to behold, very loud, a lot of food, a lot of music. But when we go through difficult times, we are just as loud. There'll be just as much food and just as much music because we celebrate life, good, bad, or indifferent. But we're really there for each other. To Latinos, Hispanics, education includes not only what one learns at school, but also manners, behavior, and religious beliefs. And you'll hear that a lot in Latino families where it's like, I don't care if you have your PhD, you better say bendición, or you better respect me, or you better take your shoes off when you come into my house, or did you go to church on Sunday? Not just Easter Sunday, but every Sunday. These things are very crucial and instrumental to us, and it's been passed on generation to generation. Education also plays a very important role as persons with higher degrees are respected for their knowledge, and they're typically the ones that we tend to go to. Even if it's a question that we can Google, we'll still go, oh, mira, Christian is getting his doctorate. Call him, he'll know what to do. And it's like, well, we just want to find out if Target is open till 9 o'clock. No, but llámalo a él, call him. So you'll see that a lot within our families and in our culture. Some other things is some members of the Latino Hispanic community still use traditional herbs and medications from their native homelands. We have things called alcoholado, which is like a rubbing alcohol. We use Vicks for almost everything. That's not a stereotype, that is true. And we typically will heal ourselves through faith before we go to the hospital. The use of home remedies is a common practice in Latin American countries. And guess what? It's a common practice here in the US as well. Some countries use the traditional witch doctor, which they call a curandero, which basically is someone who is able to pray over you, is able to give you different healing remedies, and just it's that faith-based mentality. And you'll see that a lot within the Latino culture. Has always been a part of it, and it still is a part of it. Healthcare values, unfortunately, and this is something that we're working on, is that we're not used to preventative medicine. You typically wait until the very last minute to go to the doctor. And once again, I speak from experience. My father was one of those that was very stubborn. Oh, I'm good. If I can walk, if I can talk, I'm good, even though he was really sick. So we typically tend to wait. And mental illness, unfortunately, another stigma that we're trying to change, that I'm personally trying to change, is that it's viewed as craziness, and some people are reluctant to seek help because of fear of how their neighbors or families will react. And that, unfortunately, is something that needs to be changed, because we know that mental health, especially during COVID and especially during the racial pandemic that we're going through, mental illness, mental health is more important than it's ever been. Some suggestions to help you join with Hispanic families: avoid assumptions. We do not all eat hot sauce. We don't all know how to dance salsa. We don't even all speak Spanish. So it's a matter of understanding and knowing your audience and knowing the individual you're speaking with. If somebody grew up in Puerto Rico, their lifestyle is going to be a lot different than my lifestyle growing up in New York City. We're both Puerto Rican. Trust me, if I can turn the camera around, I have a big Puerto Rican flag right in my backyard. We wave our flag loud and proud. The Taino blood runs through our veins, but we are different in the way that we live according to the geography of where we grew up. Take the time to find out about each family's beliefs and values, because that varies as well. But once again, that's the way to earn trust and respect. Understand traditional gender roles, that machismo can mean a nurturing, protective man, as well as a stereotypical tough guy. Women too contribute substantially to their families and traditional roles. And honestly, I'll be the first to say, women are truly the backbones of our family. They're the ones that hold everything down. when it comes down to the cooking, to making sure that everybody is on time, to making sure that things are being done. So that machismo term is something that is often used in our culture, but it's not necessarily true, and the perception needs to change, because our beautiful Latina women are strong and they really hold the family down. And our connections with extended family is especially important. But don't generalize about gender roles. So knowing that abuelita, grandma, abuelito, I mean, my dad at 74 years old used to come and pick weeds from the backyard and could barely walk, but still wanted to mow the lawn and still wanted to do things. And I'm like, no, it's okay, relax, I've got it. But that's the way it is, and our connections to each other last forever. Recognize the importance of family, be willing to devote the time and energy necessary to meet as many members of the family as you can, because we do value that. And we may go to an appointment and there may be 7 people at one appointment for one person, but guess what? Everybody is invested in that person's health. And be ready to help families maintain their traditional family system, even in the face of great obstacles. Understanding the importance of extended family. Those related by marriage and very distant relatives are very significant connections as well. So can't overlook this valuable family resource. A lot of times we look at extended family as, oh, that's just the in-laws, but no, they hold just as much weight. And once you're in that family, you're in that family. I still maintain connections. I'm divorced, but guess what? My father-in-law, my brothers-in-law, those are my best friends, and those are people that I go to, even though me and my ex-wife obviously are not together, we still have that relationship and that connection, regardless of the fact. Don't take offense if a family is uncomfortable with Anglo Sisters of Care, because they're not used to it. Like I said earlier, they have their own methods and their own way of doing things. So it's a matter of just understanding that, and rather than adding to the pressure, find out how they deal with their problems, how they treat their problems and the situations that come up. Very quickly, and I'm almost done. A lot of the reason why the Puerto Rican population, the Latino population, grew exponentially here in the Rochester area, and I'm sure in Buffalo, was Hurricane Maria and the earthquakes that happened thereafter. About 4,500 people, specifically Puerto Ricans, were helped to resettle in Rochester. They got here in November, and you know how our weather is in upstate New York, and they came from Puerto Rico. They don't need coats, they don't need jeans, they don't need boots. They came to our weather. Since then, about 7,000 Puerto Ricans have relocated to this area. So our population will continue to grow, and we will continue to be an important and crucial part of our community here in the upstate Western New York area. The impact of Hurricane Maria and the earthquakes on Puerto Rican families, obviously loss of loved ones, many months living without water, electricity, enough food, lack of medical resources, loss of jobs, families having to be separated, children missing weeks and if not months of school. This all led to increased suicidal rates, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, which is very relevant today, still years after the hurricane and just about 1.5 to 2 years after the earthquake. So it's something to really keep in mind, that in a short period of time, we've been through so much and are still going through a lot of these things as we speak today, years after the hurricane. There are still parts of Puerto Rico that are being rebuilt, and there are still people that have not been able to return.
Thank you, Julio. I appreciate your giving us all this information. It's great information. Just in the interest of time, I think maybe Joanna, if you want to maybe move on to the questions for the speakers from Puerto Rico and ask them the questions.
Sure. Yep. We're going to have the questions posted up on the screen in a moment. As we go through and ask the questions, for everyone who's here with us, you can expect 2 to maybe 3 of our panelists to answer each one of the questions. And again, feel free to type into the chat as we're talking. If a question pops up, a follow-up question, or just an unrelated question, you can definitely type that in and we will try to get as many of those in as we can.
I did just put in the chat as well. I mean, we want to thank Julio for being here from Ibero. Our office, Midwest Arbor, is hosting an event about high school graduation barriers in conjunction with Ibero, and we wanted to invite others to attend. So feel free to check that out.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, and Julio is not leaving us because he is also on the panel. So we will be hearing more from him. In addition to Christian, Adriana, and Paola. So to begin, we had a little bit of an introduction, and if anybody wanted to elaborate specifically on what part of Puerto Rico they come from, and if you've lived in, multiple parts of Puerto Rico or multiple parts of the states, if you went back and forth, and how long you've been in the mainland US, meaning, the United States, literally the states, not any of our territories, including Puerto Rico. So go ahead, anybody who would like to answer.
I can go ahead. I grew up, and up until I guess I was 18, I studied in San Juan, and then I moved to Mother West up on the west side. So I got schooling from very different areas, and then I moved out here, and I've been in Massachusetts for 3 years.
I can go next. Like I said before, I'm from Cataño. I only have lived in Puerto Rico or here in this area in Rochester. I've been here for 18 years. I've been living in this area. This seems like a long time because 13 years in Puerto Rico, 18 years here. I feel like that balance is no longer there.
Okay, thank you. If we want to, Paola, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I'm basically the same as Adriana because I began in Caguas, and then after I graduated high school, I moved to the west side to study. But for internships, I moved to different states. I went to Idaho, and it was like something completely different than what I encountered at Massachusetts. So it was like a shocking experience to know what it felt to like learn here in Puerto Rico, learn in Idaho that's like super far from Massachusetts, and learn in Massachusetts. Even though I've been just in the mainland for a couple of months, it's very shocking to see the difference in every place I've been.
Thank you. And I mean, as we continue, we may have another question or two that might touch on it. And, Adriana, Paola, and Christian, if you can think of like a specific thing that stuck out to you or, an experience that you had, feel free to share those as we continue. Like, for example, this question, which is what is one major difference between school in Puerto Rico and school on the mainland? There's a variety of categories there, but feel free to unmute yourself to elaborate.
Sure. So I think at least amongst technology, when I was in high school, I went to a private school. So it was assumed that people had the means to, for example, have their own laptops, and there were like smart monitors and everything. And then my undergrad was a state school. So it was, I guess, the exact opposite. So the classrooms were really old. People used the computer labs a lot because they didn't have laptops. They didn't really use any technology in our schooling. I would say it wasn't like a big part of it. And then moving out here, I'm in a law school now, and it's just the exact opposite. You have automated projectors. Everyone has a laptop. The professors have microphones. There are cameras set up to record every class, even before COVID times. And there are smart boards everywhere. And I remember just like being shocked by it all, like that a professor from their podium could automate and like slide everything down, open all the windows. And for me, it was shocking. And I remember everyone being like, oh, like you didn't have this in your undergrad? Like this is different.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing about the technology. Maybe one of our other panelists could focus either on like subject area, content area, or like school structure, like, how the day is structured, or, what kind of cultural differences there might be.
Well, it's gonna be a little bit different, but when I went to school, I went to private school, and it was a religious one. And so one of our classes obviously is religion. And obviously during transition between classes too, everything is like, outdoors, because again, it's like summer like obviously. And, you feel, I guess at the time when I was there, I felt like, the nature all around me, at least in my school, the only bad thing is that it was like really gated, like almost you felt like you were in prison in a way, because it was like this huge gate protecting the school. Okay, so that's the only sad thing about the school I was at. But is there any specific question? I don't know about the curriculum because I was not paying attention to obviously at that when I was like in middle school. So, but
So I'm thinking.
it seems like,
So I'm thinking like maybe since you were saying, how it was all outdoors, right? And then you come here and like, what were you thinking? What were you feeling when you stepped into the mainland schools? Like, how was it different surroundings wise?
When I had lunch here, you just sit there and you just wait until you're done eating, obviously, and you wait until the bell rings and that's it. But at the school I was, you ate and you went outside. You could have played basketball, volleyball, or baseball, or whatever other sports they had available at your school. And then when the time was over, it was up, everybody just went back inside, and here I didn't get a lot of, physical activities between my lunches, I guess, or between like some of my classes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you, that's good. Paola, did you want to say anything or no?
I haven't studied in the States, like in the mainland, so I feel like I have nothing besides the curriculum to like say, because definitely it is shocking that we, at least if you are in a private school in Puerto Rico, religion is a class you need to take, and if you fail that class, you fail that grade. So like that is super important, at least for the Puerto Rican culture. And even if I don't identify as a religious person, I am in a religious school and I need to pass this class because it's like the most important thing for the school. So that's the biggest thing that I can at least say about this right now.
Can I say something real quick? Again,
Of course.
there's a huge difference between a kid who comes from a private school and a public school. Just to let you know, the services are completely different. Okay, just keep that in mind.
So regardless of, the focus on religion not probably being as prominent in the public schools, it just everything, the access to technology, just the resources are not there. Okay, thank you. If we
Joanna, I'm going to type in real quick. We have a question from the chat. Carrie K asked an excellent question. How are the needs of students with disabilities addressed in Puerto Rico? I don't know if you could talk about that maybe in the private schools versus the public schools, if you happen to know.
So at least I attended a private school and there were some kids with disabilities and at least people would help them. But if they were bullied or anything, because I did see that happen a lot, no one would like stand up for the kid, neither a student, neither a professor or a teacher, sorry. So that was hard to watch. I don't know if it was any different in public schools. I feel like it's not, because here like private school is the best and anything under it's just mediocre, even if it's not true. That's how people here see it. So I feel like if it was at that point in a private school, I don't want to imagine how they were treated in a public school, because at least private schools try to get ramps to help people with disabilities or like try to help the kids, but in a public school, they're not as focused on each kid. They're just focused on giving this random class to a bunch of kids and keep going with your day. So.
Thank you. No, that, I mean, I think that was a very interesting point, because I know a big part of special education on the mainland is advocating for students with disabilities and advocating for their rights. And it seems like, although, you know, the identification process exists and there is help available, the advocacy isn't really a thing. Anybody else?
I will say that I have had a few classmates who had siblings who had disabilities, and they would tend to go to specialized schools for that disability. It wasn't like they could easily be immersed through the programs that already existed at the schools that I went to.
Can I also ask a question about that as well? Kind of coming off of that vein. I do notice that there is potentially an over-identification of students with disabilities that come to the mainland US from Puerto Rico. Is there any guess as to why that may be occurring in Puerto Rico? Or maybe maybe somebody can speak to that if they happen to know.
Honestly, I have no idea. I can just tell you about my personal experience in regards of.
When you say over identification, you're saying that when students get to the mainland, they identify themselves as having disabilities?
Yeah, so they may come to the mainland with an IEP from Puerto Rico.
I wonder if it has to do with the language, thinking that if I come here and I identify myself as having a disability, I may get accommodations, I may get other kinds of treatments that will help me succeed that otherwise I would not get if I'm in a classroom with everybody else. Because when you come, the fear of the language is very big. And you know, you could be extremely smart, but if you don't speak the language well, you may feel that you are going to fail. So you want some assurances that you're gonna get some help.
I think that's so interesting. Thank you so much for chiming in on that.
That's what I'm thinking, because I can tell you when I came here to go to UB for my PhD, I came right from Puerto Rico. And I had a bachelor's in chemistry from the University of Puerto Rico. So, and some of my classes were in English because the professors were from the mainland and the books were all in English, but still I didn't feel like I could speak the language fluently, you know, to the point that some of my classmates who spoke fast, I would just run from them. I didn't want to talk to them because they speak too fast and I couldn't understand what they were saying. And so it took a while to get used to it. However, I was understanding everything that the professors were saying. I was able to succeed. I finished my PhD in chemistry at UB, but it's that initial, you know.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Thank you so much for that information. I think it's really important for us as EL educators to hear that, that there's a fear, like a real fear of the English language coming to the mainland.
It's very real. When I was at the University of Puerto Rico, some of the best students in the program would not speak English. You just cannot get them to speak English, even though they were the best students and they read the books, they did well and they could write it, but they did not want to speak English.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see we have a bunch more questions in the chat. So, but we are going to look at the question on the screen right now. And for our panelists, if you can pull up the chat, if you know how to pull up the chat and you see a question from the chat that you would like to answer, you can feel free to chime in with that as well. So right now, though, we're going to focus on Those of you who have had experiences in New York, or I mean, I guess in the mainland versus in Puerto Rico, what's one thing you wish your teacher in the mainland would have done differently from the beginning that may have been very helpful for you to increase your success or your comfort or your acclimation?
So for me, I feel like in my class of like maybe 100 people, I was like one of 2 Hispanic people. And that was signaled, I think, too much, where the reason that I decided to study in Massachusetts was because it's in the same federal circuit as Puerto Rico. So they would like often bring it up and be like, well, do you know this? Do you know that? And like, I don't necessarily think I benefited from being signaled out. I feel like if someone wants to know, they can make a little bit more of an effort to do some research on the culture instead of singling a student out in front of like 100 people.
Thank you. So, I mean, as much as we want to honor the, a person's culture, especially when we get a student from another culture in our room, we don't want to rely or point it out repeatedly, because that actually does not help you connect with the student.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Especially if you can tell that the teacher didn't go through the effort of researching it first themselves. It just feels like we all have Google. Like you can do a light Google before you have me explain my entire culture to you in front of a bunch of people.
Sure. And I know right now we talk about culturally and linguistically responsive teaching like all the time. It's like the buzzword, right? So when you want to connect with a student, showing that you have made the effort to do some research so you can kind of hold your own in a conversation and maybe just ask them clarifying questions, as opposed to wanting to just learn everything from that student where you didn't put any effort in. Thank you. Is there any other panelists who would like to comment?
Sure. I'd like to comment on this one. Pretty much like, and I'm just talking about my own personal experience, of course. I would have loved my teachers to include me more in the lesson. And I know that my English at the time wasn't great, but even in the smallest way, I think it would have made a difference, because at the time I felt like a ghost. I was there, but I wasn't really seen. And I also felt like I was just waiting for my moment that never came, at least my first year. So that's what I think that. And I'm not just saying the ESL teachers at the time, they included me, but I'm talking about, again, it could be math, English, science.
Sure. Can you specifically say maybe something small that could have been done to make you feel like you were seen?
I can't think of it right now, but if you give me a minute or so, I can.
Sure. Yeah. Whenever you think of something, just chime in.
Sure.
You can either say it verbally or
Sure.
type it in the chat. Anybody else who wanted to comment on this one? I know, Paola, you kind of can't. All right, let's go to the next question as Christian thinks.
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Sweet.
Again, I know it's hard to prep like a kid that barely knows any English, right? Is if you take, let's say, a little bit of your time during your lunchtime, just one day, and prep your kid, saying, hey, today I want you to participate. I'm going to ask you this question, so you don't catch the kid off guard or whatever. That could be a way, and just to make sure that you build their confidence in some way.
Sure. So just making that effort to connect with the student ahead of time, or even just maybe if they had just asked you some questions or just tried to have a little chat with you, right? Just a little bit of an effort where you felt like you were important and you were wanted there.
I mean, it could be as simple as passing, the papers around. It depends. It depends on the class, of course.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Because, sometimes I know people say all the time, putting your name in the math question or something, like, okay, but like, it doesn't have to be that all the time, or, because you also don't want to be calling kids out all the time, like Adriana just mentioned. So just including students where language isn't the barrier, it's not the defining factor to them being part of the class. Thanks, Christian. Maybe we could go to the next question. I know it says up here I have control of the screen, but I don't know how to change any slides or do anything.
This is the next question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what is one of the, so this is the reverse question. So what is something that a mainland or New York teacher did for you that was most helpful in helping you succeed or you know, get used to school here at in the mainland?
I can speak to this one a little bit in the sense of, honestly, just believe in me as a student. You know, like I said, I didn't grow up in Puerto Rico, but I grew up in the South Bronx, and life already was beating me up enough. And when I went home, I was already going through all of that. So school was sometimes that safe place. So that belief, because sometimes that's the only support you're gonna get. So I know that for me, I remember my 4th grade teacher to this day. I'm 45 years old. We're talking about ages ago, but I still remember her because I could tell that she truly cared. So that's one thing that she did for me that really instilled in me that support, that somebody has my back.
Thank you. Adriana?
I'm going to be very honest about this. I don't think anyone did anything to help me in this case. Any teachers, because at least I learned most of my English through my schooling and also TV. So I've always been very confident about my English, but it's still, I moved to an entirely different region. It was, I never noticed how much people would actually mumble and how much like little turns of phrases that I'd never heard before. Like my professors kept referring to like busy work. I had no idea what busy work was, and they would say it over and over and over again. I had no clue. And when people were speaking too fast, I feel like I definitely relate to what Mr. Eliseo was saying before, where like I would just zone out. I would get a little bit scared if they were talking too quickly. And at this point, I'm very much accustomed, but I feel like that was more through the people that I even live with and the friends that I made and like being more immersed in the culture. But it was definitely a big culture shock. And I don't feel like any of the teachers or professors, maybe they didn't notice because I don't have much of an accent, but I don't really feel like I had any extra like help or even like identifying that.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, and I know, you know, there's many ENL teachers here. A lot of times, especially content area teachers will say, you know, well, I mean, you know, Adriana's fine. She's talking to her friends in the hallway. She understands everything. But it's not, you know, first of all, talking to your friends is very different than academics, but also that cultural adjustment, even though Puerto Rico is part of the US, culturally it's I mean, it's a different world. Even if you go down south to some of the southern states, students that come from South Carolina or Florida, it's a big adjustment. So thank you for pointing out the cultural, and I'm sorry that, you know, you didn't have that great 4th grade teacher or whatever.
And thanks. I mean, at this point, it was a rough first semester, but I managed to adjust.
Joanna, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to give you a 10-minute warning.
Okay, thank you. So another question to ask here, how do students and teachers interact in Puerto Rico versus in New York or in the mainland? You know, what is the role of the teacher? What does it look like? What does it look like to be a student in the classroom? You know, just give us some like compare and contrast. Christian.
Sure. If anyone wants to take it, I'm fine with that. But pretty much, you know, again, private school, and I think even the public schools, I think uniforms make a huge difference, right? I can tell you that my teacher had her uniform and I had my uniform, and she had her role, I had my role, and there was that, you know, that clear evidence of somehow like a level, like almost like military, like, you know, who's your commander, right? she's in charge. You got to respect her, right? And, and because it was a religious school, my family was affiliated with the church, right? And again, obviously the interaction is going to be slightly different from a public school, but the teachers felt the freedom to speak freely, obviously, to my parents, because again, they already had this relationship. So relationships are very critical, right? So, and in comparison to here, again, the language barrier, so it's going to be really tough for me to really give too much on that one. So my parents pretty much were like, yeah, like yes, no, yes, whatever they were saying. If they would just, they couldn't really explain back, or my needs and my desires to my teachers.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I thought that was really interesting when you mentioned that your teachers would talk to your parents, at church service, or because they were really active members of the church. And yeah, we definitely do not have that connection here, and a lot of the struggle that we have is increasing parent engagement for our Latino students. So that was a great comment. Thank you. Is there anybody else who wanted to comment on this? Okay, so then let's look at, as far as communication styles, what are the differences in communication style afuera versus Puerto Rico? So, mainland versus Puerto Rico. Like if you have a question or a need in school, how do you signal that? If you have a concern, or I mean, we already know that it doesn't seem like bullying, at least for special education students, is addressed. So, I wonder, like, how do you just suck it up? Like, how do you communicate your needs?
At least here, we try to like always look for how Christian said, like the hierarchy, for to say like the teacher is like the main person you go to, and it just doesn't go further than that. If the teacher does nothing, then all the arguments fell. And I feel like in the States it's different, like problems like these are tackled, and in Puerto Rico at least, I've never seen like that kind of like serious action be taken into consideration. I feel like that's very important, because at some point it makes us like insensitive of other people's needs. Like, for example, like here we have a lot of things we do that are not necessarily correct, but then if you go and do that in the States, people are gonna be like, oh, I can't believe you just did that. Like, it's just something very cultural but not necessarily correct that I feel that we should tackle in order to not make these mistakes in Puerto Rico. Like, I don't know, like bullying. Someone hears things like, oh, I'm gonna push you, that's fine because I do it here. Then if you do that in the States, like you're gonna get like consequences, and like just examples with those little things can just turn into something bigger. At least that's what I have to say about this.
No, that's a good point, knowing that, behaviors are seen differently and consequences vary, especially when we look at disproportional suspension rates and things like that. Thank you, Paola. Christian, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to agree with Paola here in regards of the teachers here. I noticed that they try to be your friend. At least they give you that vibe where you feel open enough where you can, you can share your issues, right? Again, I'm just telling you how I felt at the time when I was over there in Puerto Rico at this school. You don't want to show there's something wrong with you, or you don't want to show that, at least the way I was raised, that you have no issues. You know what I mean? So I couldn't really say something was wrong with me, or if I needed assistance with something. So I was just, I guess, suck it up and just did what I needed to do.
Thank you. And then when we go back to what you were saying, and what Paola mentioned with the hierarchy too, I can see how that can blur the lines a bit with like respect and, you know, what your roles are when all of a sudden the teacher's like a friend and a confidant, you know, so thank you. And then I think we have time for one more question here. What is valued most in your culture or in your home or in your family? What is the number one most important thing? I know Julio touched on education having a different meaning, a more holistic meaning than just, you know, facts and academics, but what is valued most in your family or your culture?
At
Paola?
least in my culture, or like my family, is like nothing is bigger than family. Nothing goes over family. Anyone else is a stranger. Nothing is stronger than our family bond. Like, at least that is my experience. And everyone has a different experience, even if we're all Latinos, but it's like really big on the Latin community that it's always family comes first. And I feel that that's really different when I go to the States and I see other families in the States. Like, when I went to college, my family was like, you're not moving out of the house. You're gonna go to college like a 20-minute drive and you'll come back. But in the States, it's like once you're 18, you're like, bye, go away for 4 years, see you when you graduate and when you have like your own life. But here, you stay in your house as long as possible. And like, your parents are the ones that, like, they always have the last say, regardless. You're like 20, 30, they still have like control, not like control over you in a bad way, but they're still your parents and you need to respect them. And at least like my family has a saying, like, you're under this roof, then you do anything I say, like, because you're under my roof and I do everything for you. And I bared you for 9 months. Like, whoa, I have like 1,000 things that my mom tells me to like make me feel like bad to like do anything she wants. But at the end of the day, that's how it is. And I'm like super used to it. And at the end of the day, I also grew up with those values, and to me, family is super important. Adriana knows this because I've talked to her about it like 1,000 times. So yeah, to everyone, their experience is different, but at least mine, family is.
So if you have to stay home and help a sibling or whatever, like that comes first, right? If you have to go get a job to help out the family, that comes first.
Yeah, definitely. No doubt.
Thank you, Paola.
And I just want to echo that because I feel like that is definitely the biggest thing. That, at least like to me, has always felt like the biggest difference, where like our perception of US families are like, the second you turn 18, you're like, you got to get your own place, you got to move out, like you're gone. For us, it's like, my brother lived in my parents' house until he was 26, and that was completely normal, and all his friends understood and no one gave him grief for it. Where like I try to explain that here to like my friends, and they're like, oh, is your like brother a bum, why is he at home? Like, it's very strange, but there is a lot of unity. And that is true in what Julio was saying earlier, where like you will have a lot of interesting families where like you'll live with your grandparents and like your cousin might live with you, and things like that are very, very common.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Christian?
No, it's fine if you want to move on.
Are you sure? I'm just looking at the time. It is 5:30.
No, don't worry. I was just going to
okay.
agree with them.
So also family for you. So that's the consensus.
Oh yeah. No matter what, whatever is yours is not really yours, it's theirs.
All right. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for participating, and especially those of you who put comments and questions in the chats or jumped right in. And then an especially large thank you to our panelists for, getting real with us, being personal, sharing some much needed information, because the more we know, and not to call you out, Adriana, because we kind of did that the whole time, but you volunteered for it. But, now that we know these things, we can go and continue our research and take this information to help connect with our students that are Latino, to help them feel seen and to help them succeed. Is Kate, are you closing out, or Jamie, is